What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff, 3 and Out podcast. What a night. Live on AMP, live on YouTube. You can subscribe, listen to us on the podcast, 3 and Out, wherever you listen to podcasts. We got a big show coming up Monday night after the Monday Night Football game with the Dallas Cowboys playing Tom Brady. Colin Cowherd and myself will be on. And we will have a trivia question at the end of the show. And the first 3 people to get it right will get some free volume merch. Me and Cowherd, post-Cowboy, post-Brady game, Monday night podcast, live rocking and rolling, YouTube, AMP. You can find us there. But first, obviously, tonight, Saturday night, we got the first game was pretty cool. It was fun. We'll get into Brock Purdy, but that was a legendary meltdown by my man, Brandon Staley. So let's dive in. But before we do that, I got to tell you about my friends at Gametime. Gametime is the fastest growing ticket app in America. I'm going to my first ever hockey game this week, NHL game. Phoenix Coyotes, Washington Capitals. This Thursday, I'm going because of Gametime. Here's what you do. You go to the Gametime app. You go to your Apple phone. That's what most of you have, I'm sure. But if you don't, go to your app store, download Gametime, sign up. And when you make your first purchase, use the promo code JOHN, John, for $20 off. That's John, my name, John, for $20 off. NBA games, NHL games. You live in one of these cities with football that's still going on, playoff game, boom, got you covered. Concerts, college basketball, you name it, any event. Download the Gametime app, sign up, and use my promo code, JOHN. I used it. I'm going to a hockey game, my first ever. Pretty fired up, not going to lie. Do it right now. Love my friends at Gametime. Can't recommend them enough. Where do we start? Where do we start? There's a tried and true formula in the sport of football. The importance of coaching at the highest levels of high school, the highest levels of college, and obviously in the NFL are very, very important. You can be an average coach with great players and get away with it in certain games, certain seasons. But in big moments, when you're facing another coach who is better than you and has equal the talent, you're eventually going to be in trouble. And I've been saying for a long time, I think Brandon Staley is a fraud. Last year, his defense was horrendous. They lost to the Raiders to get into the playoffs in what I thought would be tough to top as one of the most embarrassing losses I've ever seen. Well, he did it tonight against the Jacksonville Jags, up 27-0. 27-0. Now, in fairness to Staley, over the second half of this season, his defense, which he is the defensive coordinator of, has been much better and has been good. And I think you'd think that I was going to give him credit for being up 27-0 and having 4 first-half interceptions against the former number 1 pick, Trevor Lawrence. But as a wise man once said, you might run the volume, his name's Colin Cowherd, if you want credit, go to a bank. I wasn't going to give you any credit for that because 4 of those picks, 3 of them were just horrendous decisions by Trevor Lawrence. Throws it right to Asante Samuel, who, when I was with the Eagles, Asante Samuel was our best corner, makes a bunch of plays, like father, like son. And his other pick was hit off a helmet. Freaky play. I'm not giving Brandon Staley any credit on those picks. But when you're leading and you're going to win a playoff game, like it's hard to take away. You win a playoff game. I give you credit for playoff wins. Up 27-0, what looked like going into halftime, I was like, how do you blow this game? I had a buddy in the league who also does not like him, goes, I don't even think he can blow it. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence, they have a touchdown drive at the end of the first half. And then the second half, what happens? Coaching. I don't know what's said in the locker room at halftime. We don't know the exact halftime adjustments, certain routes against certain coverages. I think a lot of halftime, and you saw Doug Peterson at the end of the first half that just says, he just needs to calm down. We're going to be okay. Just take better care of the football, and we'll be all right. What does Doug Peterson have? The only Super Bowl in Philadelphia Eagles history. And he did it with a backup quarterback, former quarterback, understands the mindset and the way those guys are wired. Clearly goes into halftime, as the head coach / play caller and gets a hold of his guy. And Trevor Lawrence, who we'll get into in a second, comes out and dominates. Brandon Staley, the defensive coordinator, spotted this enormous lead, just has to not allow them to score touchdowns. Maybe a touchdown here or a touchdown there, but they can't score several touchdowns. It's the only way they can get back in the game. You're up 27-7. Hell, one more touchdown from you probably ices it. But what happens? Blown coverage after blown coverage. Trevor Lawrence, touchdown after touchdown. All of a sudden, you're looking up. The Jags have the ball because Doug Peterson had gone for 2, only down 2, drive the field and get in field goal range and win the game. If the Spanos family, who historically is one of the cheapest families in all of professional sports, if they can't look themselves in the mirror and go, now's the time, we need to obviously fire this guy who is over his head as the head coach. You can clearly do better. And sometimes when you go, well, you could clearly do better. The Raiders are about to figure this out. Can they do better than Derek Carr? History would tell us probably not. But there's a guy sitting out there right now to be their coach who is in LA all the time for Fox, in Sean Payton, who is an offensive guy. You have the most talented quarterback. I'm not saying the best, but he's definitely the most talented of the last 3 guys you've had. Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers, and now this guy. One thing Phillip Rivers never truly had a moment with Marty, never had really good coaches. Always went with cheap coordinators. And what did it get him? Not that far. Underachievement. Drew Brees had to leave the Chargers to go to the Saints and link up with Sean Payton. Boom. They go like a rocket ship. Drew Brees is going to the Hall of Fame. Great coaching takes great talent and great quarterbacks as far as you want to go. And right now, Justin Herbert is with a guy who has no business being the head coach. And we saw it last year at the end of the season, and now we're seeing it this year at the end of the season. That's beyond embarrassing. That's an all-time choke job. Obviously, the defense gave up all the points. He's the defensive coordinator. Multiple touchdowns that Trevor Lawrence threw. And listen, I give him credit for staying calm and collected, especially after the disaster. But guys were wide open because of miscommunications. Well, if the miscommunication is going on, you're either coaching it or allowing it to happen. What is going on? Why do your defenders not know where to go? This is the 18th game of the season. And the other thing that stood out, obviously he blew a challenge late in the game. In fairness, Doug Peterson blew a challenge that he never threw the red flag for when he was standing with it. So even if he was being aggressive, whatever, there was a moment tonight when one of the Chargers wide receivers got hurt. And the broadcast, and we'll get into that in a second, says, well, they're down to 3 wide receivers because Mike Williams didn't even make the trip. And it goes back to last week. Playing one of your best players, one of your most impactful players who has an injury history in that game is malpractice. That alone is a fireable offense, separate from the night. Even if they had won the night and got to next week against the Bills or the Chiefs and lost, I still would have fired him. Because what happened to Mike Williams? Now it's football. You can get hurt in practice. You can get hurt in the weight room. You can get hurt running sprints on your own to keep your cardio up. But to playing in a game that does not matter when you have an injury history and your impact and your importance to that said team is of the highest degree, and it's because your coach is okaying it when he easily could have been like, you're taking this week off. We just need to get you to next Saturday night. That alone was a fireable offense. And you saw the impact of it tonight when they had an injury, and all of a sudden, offensively, it's like Keenan Allen or bust. And I just think Brandon Staley, if Dean Spanos can't fire him tonight, I don't know what to say. But we should just pack up the Chargers. And just the NFL should grab Justin Herbert and put him somewhere else. Because that was an absolute terrible loss and really an impressive win by a championship-level coach. And speaking of a championship-level coach, he got the best out of his star quarterback. Now, Trevor Lawrence had one of the shittiest first halves you'll ever see. 4 interceptions. And 3 of them were beyond horrendous. Hitting Asante Samuel, like right in the numbers, in stride. Can't happen. Not in a playoff game. But, you know, most people, when things are going well, they can have success. They can carry themselves in the right way. Like, everyone's cocky when whatever business they're in, things are rolling. A lot of people made money in 2021. How'd it go in 2022? Bet not great. A lot of guys could throw touchdowns in the NFL. What happens the following week or the following half or the following drive when you throw a pick six? How do you react? And Trevor Lawrence, who, listen, I didn't even know what to make of it. I'm like, this is insane. He looks fucking awful. To come back out in the second half and dominate, because that's what he did, dominated, shows you a couple things. One, his mental toughness, like, this is a playoff game. At home, it's a big deal. Even though the brand, it's the Chargers, not like you're playing the Bills or the Cowboys or whatever, but we had 30 million people watching Saturday night. NBC, Al Michaels calling it. To bounce back like that, to be as calm, cool, and collected as he was in the second half, to make as many plays, throw a dime after dime after dime, like, that's what it's supposed to look like. And honestly, I was impressed tonight with him as I would have been if he just would have had a 7-touchdown night and they would have won 50-30. Because you learn more about a person, about a player, how they react when things are really, really shitty, in chaos. Why do we give the Bills assistant trainer so much credit for the Damar Hamlin situation? Because it's unprecedented. No one ever seen it. Dude's going to die right there on the field. They can teach you all they want in classes, in a book, in YouTube's, whatever, in walkthroughs in your job, how to handle that situation. It's another thing when the dude's lying there on the ground, right? For any human being, anyone that's ever seen a doctor or a medical professional handle themselves in a plane, in an airport, in a situation outside of the hospital when someone goes down, it is remarkable. Because most of us freeze, we freak. It's a natural reaction. And just like when most people, shit starts hitting the fan, they fold. They fold. That is the majority of people. I'd argue in any business. When things turn, most people, it gets worse. The best, the cream of the crop, they lean into it and they figure a way out. It's why we have the haves and have-nots in this country. No different than why we have the haves and have-nots as players. Now, Trevor Lawrence, physically, really gifted player. Tall, can run, big arm. But tonight we saw him play at a high level. I thought last week against the Titans was pretty shitty. He was not very good. Obviously, this first half, it's hard to have a worse first half in NFL history. 4 picks in the first half of a playoff game at home. But to bounce back like that, throw 4 touchdowns, take complete control of the game, and just eviscerate Brandon Staley's play calling was really something cool to see. And really quick before we dive into Niners and Seattle, these games are an entertainment property. Obviously, the game, is going to entertain us or it's not, right? Good game, regardless what voices we hear, we're going to watch. Football, it doesn't matter who calls the games, right? Joe and Troy got $150 million to go to ESPN. Fox had better ratings this year with Burkhardt and Greg Olsen. I like Kevin Burkhardt. I know him personally. I mean, I've talked to him before. Don't know Greg Olsen, but it just shows you, like, you get great games, you get high-level pros. It doesn't necessarily matter who's calling the game. But anyone listening to this, if your team doesn't always play in the A slot, especially when your team's having a rough year, you get the crappier announcers, and it can be a rough listen. Tonight, Al Michaels is a legend. And at 75, 76 years old, the energy he brings is fantastic. And Tony Dungy, by all accounts, incredible human being. Very accomplished football guy. Player, longtime assistant, resurrected Tampa, won a Super Bowl. Just because you have all these accolades and all these accomplishments doesn't mean you should be calling a game. I thought tonight was an embarrassment for NBC. Tony Dungy, like, have another cup of coffee, man. I can barely hear you. Wake up. But in fairness to Tony Dungy, he's been that guy for a decade on television. He's really, really boring. Do better, NBC. Like, do better. You have a million people you could choose from to just give us a little more energy. Like I said, it doesn't really matter who calls the game, but I thought tonight, like, wake up, Tony. I understand not everyone has unlimited energy, but Tony Dungy on a 1 to 10 scale of energy is like a 1. And I thought tonight was a pretty awful look for NBC. This is the playoffs. Holy shit. This is a big deal. This is the NFL. You're going to put this guy on, put us to sleep. Al Michaels, who's 77 years old, has quadruple the amount of energy he has on television, I thought it was a rough look. Let's dive into the 49ers in Seattle. When you go all in on a quarterback in the draft, all you're hoping for, obviously we say a star quarterback, we're just hoping for a guy that you know you can win with consistently. And the reason you win with most of the good quarterbacks is because when they're on the field, whether it's Joe Burrow, tonight Trevor Lawrence in the second half, obviously Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar when he's healthy, every single drive, as a fan of that team, you go, we might score a touchdown. We have a very good chance to drive 70, 80 yards and score a touchdown. I think sometimes we overcomplicate sports. And if you come to this show, you know, like I'm not breaking down in-depth analytically of all the different angles of the game. All the other podcasts throughout the country have that market corner. That's not my stick. Now, I also think sometimes we put more emphasis on all these like specific yards per play, points per half. The number one thing you can try to do as a football team, win the game. And the number one thing you can do as an offense is score points. Pretty basic, black and white. You could teach a 5-year-old that. And one thing with the 49ers, when they drafted Trey Lance, they were hoping to get a more explosive player because Jimmy Garoppolo, while a solid, just could man the ship, was never going to be Lewis Hamilton in a car that clearly had an upside to operate like the Mercedes F1 car, right? Because Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't do it. So their mindset when they traded all those picks was to get Trey Lance, who had a much higher ceiling. Now, we've seen consistently in the NFL, a lot of people with quote-unquote high ceilings never get there. And a huge part of the draft is sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes you get lucky. Now, you get credit for drafting whoever you draft, regardless of the round. Like, yeah, they passed on Dak several times and took him in the 4th round. They still liked him, and they drafted him. Yeah, they drafted multiple guys before they took Russell Wilson in the 3rd. The Ravens took a player, I think it might have been 2, but definitely 1, Hayden Hurst, before they took Lamar Jackson. But they still drafted Lamar Jackson. And the 49ers clearly got lucky on Brock Purdy. Did they think he would be this good? Of course not. But I give him credit for drafting the guy. And I give him individually a ton of credit for he's clearly pretty damn good. I've been watching the 49ers my entire life. I did not watch Joe Montana. I was born in the mid-'80s. By the time I really came into my own, Steve Young was the quarterback. Steve Young's the best 49er quarterback I've ever seen by a long shot, right? Garcia had his moments. Kaepernick had a couple of moments. Alex Smith had a couple of moments. Jimmy Garoppolo had a couple of moments. We could rank them. Kaepernick's ceiling was the highest. Garcia was actually the most fun. Alex was the best story. And Jimmy just won 4 playoff games as starting quarterback, or his teams did. So you could make arguments for all of them. Brock Purdy, to me, is the best passing quarterback. I'm talking start to finish, being able to do everything. Throw the ball down the field, being accurate on short stuff, being able to be mobile. The 49ers have had since Steve Young. Since he's become the starting quarterback, their offense is averaging 35 points a game. And like today, when I talk about the only goal with these players is to score points. When you're on offense, score points. And when Brock Purdy's in the game, the 49ers score points. When Trey Lance played a couple games, when Jimmy Garoppolo played a ton of games, they struggled to score a lot of points. Their defense has been really good. This year, last year, and in 2019, they have struggled on offense despite having a loaded cupboard. Deebo Samuel, stud. Kittle, baller. Ayuk, ascending star. Jawan Jennings, fantastic role player. Christian McCaffrey, baller. Elijah Mitchell, underrated stud. If you can get these guys the ball, you are going to be borderline impossible to stop. Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't really do it. Trey Lance in limited time the last couple of years really struggled to do it. Brock Purdy, all he does, throw dimes to all these guys and makes plays. Because to me, 2 things that I don't think we talk about enough to be a really good quarterback is number 1, instinctive. Do you have good instincts as a quarterback? Part of that is obviously understanding the offense and the terminology and the reads. Do you have a great feel for the position? And you watch this guy and you go, God, this guy has a great feel for the game. One thing that I was shocked in Trey Lance's limited, games was how slow he played for a running quarterback. It's like he didn't know his speed relative to the other guys. Brock Purdy, who you don't view as a runner, is in complete control of his speed running away from NFL players. He had a play today on the sideline where he kind of hesitated and stopped the linebacker and then got a couple extra yards for a first down. His instincts as a player are fantastic. And like we talked about with Trevor Lawrence, being calm, cool, and collected when things are going well and when things are hitting the fan is paramount as a quarterback. And today, the first half was a little rocky. Never looked flustered. Never looked like made some bad passes, but came back in the second half and eviscerated the Seahawks. And he's been like that every single start. Because even when he makes a bad play or he has a bad moment, he never shows it. His body language is elite. And part of being a quarterback is the way you carry yourself. Everyone's looking at you. That includes Trent Williams, Hall of Fame left tackle. That includes George Kittle. That includes Deebo Samuel. In the huddle, they all stare at you. So your mannerisms, the way you conduct yourself, the way you handle yourself in the good and definitely the bad really, really matters. All those memes about Jalen Hurts over the years are important. He doesn't get that happy when they score a touchdown, just like he doesn't get that mad when he throws a pick. That rubs off on people in a good way. Games are long. Football's hard. You need to show that you are in control. And Brock Purdy, instincts and control and just ability to just kind of be in the moment but not be outside of the moment has been really, really impressive. The Niners, their high end is just stupid high. And now they have a quarterback who can just explode when it comes to points because that's what they've been doing since then. And last but not least, Seattle, a lot of respect for this season. If you factor in today, they went 9-9. Most people, including myself, would have chalked this team as a lock top 5 picking team in the draft. Most people would have said it's impossible to win that trade with the Denver Broncos because they're going to get Russell Wilson. So no matter how many draft picks you get, he's going to be good and they're going to win games and your pick's going to suck. Well, that was the opposite. He was terrible. They're giving you the 6th pick. They gave him a ton of money. That pick alone looks like an all-time fleecing. Then for you to take Geno Smith, win 30 games, like most people, especially a lot of people in the media, because it was the sexy thing to do, and there's a cultish thing with the media. Once it becomes popular to say something, then everyone jumps on it. It's actually, it's the easiest thing to do, I think, in the profession. And everyone thought Pete was an idiot, Russell was a star. And there were moments where Pete could have been better and Russ carried the team. But clearly everyone thought, let him throw, let him throw, let him throw. Pete's like, I'm telling you, that's not a great game plan. And then they get Geno Smith, and he threw, his numbers this year, he threw 30 touchdowns. They got the very best out of the guy. They clearly have some talent. Now they got the picks. Pete Carroll's a really good coach. John Schneider is a really good general manager. And part of being good in those two roles is seeing the future. And they turned on Russell a little bit as Russell turned on them. And they realized, you know what? We're not all in on this. We're going to short him. Because part of what you have to do as a front office person is value these players like a stock. Is he ascending? Is he descending? Is he kind of just going to be stable for a couple years? And they basically said, we think he's trending down. And when you factor in the money and you factor what we could get for him, adios, see you later. Hell, they thought about doing it years ago with Josh Allen, and they would have been right then. And they clearly were right now. Now, we'll see with their quarterback situation, signing Geno long-term. I think that could be a risky proposition. Who do they draft? Is there a guy worthy of taking the 6th pick? But what a year for Seattle, who everyone just buried. Just thought Pete's going to be done, and I'm guilty as anybody. But that was a muscle flex year for a guy that's won national championships, Super Bowls, and made the playoffs without Russell Wilson. We'll see if Russell Wilson ever makes the playoffs with Pete Carroll, because I doubt that one.